I think it's a personal passion for you, because you're somebody who believes deeply in the truth. I think that's why I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's why not only you do your work with Friends of Science, but you are also working on, in your own personal capacity, exposing the lies around residential schools and mass graves which happen at them in Canada. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that? I know you have a new mini doc too.
Yeah, I produced a mini documentary that rebuts the claims in a National Geographic documentary called Sugarcane. And Sugarcane will be showing on National Geographic on December 9th, and then it starts streaming on Disney Plus and Hulu just in time for Christmas, to denigrate and blood libel, especially the Roman Catholic Church, but all Christians and all Canadians and Canadian history. So what's happened is two young filmmakers have made a documentary that takes two true stories and conflates them and turns it into one big lie. And so my mini doc deconstructs these lies. And basically the theme of Sugarcane is that priests impregnated Indigenous students at St. Joseph's Indian Residential School near the Sugarcane Reserve near Fort Williams Lake in British Columbia. And then they incinerated the unwanted newborn babies in the garbage burner at the school. And so there is a true story that a baby was found in the incinerator there, but it was reported in the Williams Lake Tribune in 1959, and an unwed mother had given birth at the school, but she had been driving home from Williams Lake to Canham Lake, where she lived, and that's about an hour and a half drive. So I suspect she went into labor along the way and just pulled in there. She had taken a practical nursing course and knew how to deliver a baby, and apparently thought the baby was stillborn. So she put the baby in the incinerator and apparently fled. Now, anyone who's given birth can understand that a person would be likely in shock. She might have been impaired in some other way, but we don't know because they never actually interview her. So the story centers around the father of one of the young filmmakers. The father's name is Ed Archie Noisecat, and he is, in fact, the baby who was found by the dairyman in the garbage burner, and the dairyman saved his life. He thought there was a cat trapped in there because he heard the crying. The other story is that in the 1960s, there was a priest there who broke his vows. He fell in love with a girl who was 22 years old. She was working there as an employee, as a seamstress. They did have a child together, and the child was put up for adoption. So that's a true story. And I understand from people in the know that even though this happened, this was not a matter of rape. It was consensual, and that they stayed in touch for the rest of their lives. That they weren't, there wasn't like this angst, if you like.
Right.
So, they conflate these two stories. And if you read the film critics' reviews, and I guess that's what really got me going, because I started reading these film critic reviews, they definitely get the impression that priests systematically raped students, burned unwanted babies in the incinerator. There was infanticide going on and on and on and on like this. So these film critics are creating a meta-narrative worldwide about Canada and Indian residential schools that is completely untrue. But it's going to be very hard to counter it because, this has been published in the New York Times, the Globe and Mail, the Irish Times, the Guardian, LA Times. In fact, ironically, the film Sugarcane just won the Best True Crime Documentary Award by Critics' Choice and Best Political Documentary, even though it's not true, and the real crime
Fiction.
is the blood libel against Roman Catholics and Canadian history.
It, and it leaves me speechless because the ease with which they paint the whole with the crimes of the few makes me very angry. It's just plain old, good old-fashioned bigotry, I think, anti-Christian bigotry. And nobody is denying that bad things happened at residential schools. But it also fosters the skepticism about residential schools, the denialism the other side wants to make illegal when they just make up things like this. It makes people almost skeptical sometimes to a fault because, well, you can't believe anything coming out of these people's mouths. And I just, the lies breathed into the ether by these people and then repeated just completely by the mainstream media. It's evil. Frankly, it's evil. The idea that young nuns and priests were leaving civilization on the intent to do harm is outlandish. Many of them did this out of just Christian charity, goodwill. They were leaving everything they knew to go into the wilderness to help.
Right.
And I think that's the majority of the experience.
Yes. And I think that the Canadian public really has to wake up and realize that this is not an issue confined only to the Indigenous community, because people don't remember, but the day after the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People was passed, which was June 21st, 2021, and that was less than a month after the claim that the Kamloops Band made of finding 215 unmarked graves, human remains, mass graves in their orchard. So 1 month after that, less than 1 month, UNDRIP was passed, even though it had been contended by 6 premiers and several First Nations bands. They did not want it to pass as written. But of course, the atrocity propaganda pushed it right through. But the day after it passed, China accused Canada of genocide on the world stage at the UN. Now, Kimberly Murray is the special interlocutor on missing children and unmarked graves related to Indian residential schools. She has just issued a more than 1,000-page report, which is her final report. And in it, she now claims that Canada is guilty of an ongoing genocide, that we're guilty of human rights crimes, that we made enforced disappearances of children. You know, this is like in parallel to what happened in Argentina, where political activists actually were disappeared by their government. You know, people would show up in the middle of the night, sweep somebody away, then you'd never see them again. That's what enforced disappearance is all about. But, you know, in those cases, you had the mothers of those children standing in the government with a picture of their child and their date and name, you know, their occupation, last seen and such like. We have no list of missing children in this country. There's no list of names, no list of missing persons reports that were filed and unresolved. And so she has filed this with the International Criminal Court of Justice and a few other international bodies like that. So I think that she's just handed a geopolitical advantage to China. And with all of the talk about foreign interference in Canada and the inquiry that's going on, you have to really ask yourself what's going on here. And I think you have to ask yourself, if Bill C413 goes through, the residential school denialism bill that Leah Gazan and Kimberly Murray are promoting, if that goes through, no one like myself would be able to try and defend and vindicate Canada if China charged us with genocide on the world stage. And you might say, oh, well, that's just silly. But remember, the once unipolar world, where the U.S. was solely kind of the policeman of the world, the king of the world, if you like, that has dramatically changed. And now the BRICS nations are exerting their strength. It's a multipolar world. And if Canada is accused of this or convicted of it at the World Court, then, we could be embargoed like South Africa was, for instance, under apartheid. There could be other kinds of reparations demanded internally. There could be civil violence related to it. And as we see what's going on in the streets right now, that's not an impossibility at all. So it's a very serious issue, and things like sugarcane will obviously be used as proof that there was systemic infanticide and disappearing of children in Canada. So I'll
Yeah,
see you in jail.
I
I
guess
like
so.
lemon seed pocky. I like lemon poppy seed cake, by the way.
We'll start a prison band. You and me.